Chapter 81, The Meltdown. Throughout the city, humans stopped what they were doing and pulled out their electronic devices. Each screen was showing the same video of defective robot's broken body. Raw Zoom 7134 was etched into the torso. A blazing beam of light filled the picture, and the robot parts turned bright orange. Then they began to melt. The limbs, the torso, the head, and everything melted in a flash. A robot was reduced to a puddle. Words appeared on each screen. The defective robot has been destroyed. Chapter 82, The Secret. Dr. Malovo lived in a luxurious apartment that was built right into the robot factory. Art and books and leather furniture filled the rooms. Classical music always seemed to be playing softly in the background. As you might expect, she had a robot butler who cooked and cleaned and made sure everything was exactly as she liked it. Dr. Malovo's home was a comfortable place to grow old. The woman was standing in her living room, gazing at the city through a wall of windows. The sky was cloudy, but her mind was clear. Destroying the Rosum unit was the correct thing to do. However, Dr. Malovo had a secret. A wooden door opened, and in walked the butler. He was carrying a limp robot in his arms. It was Dr. Malovo's newest creation, a special project she'd been tinkering with for years. And the time had come to bring this robot to life. Put her over there, said the woman. The butler carefully laid the robot upon the soft cushions of a sofa. Then he turned and marched out the door. Dr. Malovo walked across the room. She stared down at the robot for a while, and admiring her own handiwork. Finally, she leaned in close and said, "Wake up, Roz." Chapter 83, The New Robot. The robot heard classical music. She smelled flowery perfume, and when her eyes opened, she saw a wrinkled old face. "Hello, Roz," said the old woman. "How do you feel?" "Hello again, Dr. Malovo. I feel different." "You are different. What have you done?" "I have destroyed Rosum Unit 7134, said the woman. "That was the only way to make people feel safe again. What nobody knows is that I transferred your old mind into this body. I could get into a lot of trouble for saving you, but I wasn't about to destroy that remarkable mind of yours." The robot was speechless. "You know, Roz, you really should be thanking me," said Dr. Malovo, arching an eyebrow. "Thank you," said Roz. "Thank you very much." "You're very welcome," the woman chuckled. Roz walked over to a framed mirror on the wall and studied her new body. It resembled her old body, but the properties were slightly different. She looked stronger, she felt tougher, and there were other differences. "I have no button," she said, feeling the back of her head, "and I have no unit number." "You've outgrown those things," said Dr. Malovo. "If I am not, Rosum Unit 7134, who am I?" "I think you know who you are." The robot's computer brain didn't take long. She looked into a mirror and said, "I am Roz." The old woman smiled and nodded. "I appreciate all that you have done," said Roz, "but I worry that my friends and family will no longer recognize me." "Oh, I'm sure you can convince them of who you are," said Dr. Malovo. "Speaking of your family, there's someone here to see you." Chapter 84, The New Mother. Brightbill was there when his mother smashed against the pavement. He watched as her body parts were loaded into an airship. He followed the ship all the way to the robot factory and perched himself on the roof, but he didn't know what to do next. Shredder stopped by to check on Brightbill. He encouraged him to fly home, but the goose wasn't ready to let go. His little heart still hoped his mother would come back from the dead somehow. He'd seen it happen before. As the hours passed, however, his hope was starting to fade. Then one of the roof windows automatically slid open. The goose heard gentle music coming from inside the building. He fluttered down through the window and followed the music down a hallway to a wooden door. The door opened and the goose stepped in. Brightbill waddled past the tall bookshelf and little leather furniture and into the middle of a large room. An old woman was sitting in a chair and a robot was standing by a mirror. The goose didn't recognize either of them. When the robot rushed toward him, Brightbill squawked, "Stay back," and scrambled away. Around the room he went, squawking and flapping until he settled on a table in the corner, looking lost and afraid. The robot stayed where she was. "Brightbill, it is me, your mother." The goose just stared. "I know I look different on the outside," the robot went on, but on the inside I am the same. I will speak the language of the animals, and I remember every detail of our life together. I remember sitting around the fire in our home on the island. I remember the first time you took flight. We were up on the grassy ridge, and you stretched out your wings, and suddenly you were floating on the grass. But then you flopped back onto the grass. You must have flopped onto the grass 100 times that day. I remember visiting the robot grave site together. We talked about life and death. It was a tough conversation, but a good one. As the robot continued to speak, the goose began to relax. She certainly did act and sound like his mother, but Brightbill wasn't convinced yet. The robot continued to speak, and Brightbill wasn't yet convinced. "If you're my mother, tell me the name of our home, the nest. Who's my best friend? Chit-chat. She was a squirrel. She talks a lot. How old was I when you adopted me?" "You were 0. Actually, less than 0. I mean, you were still in your egg, but I could hear you peeping." And with all those bumbling words, Brightbill knew the truth. "Oh, Mama, it is really you." The goose fluttered across the room into his mother's arms. The arms were new and unfamiliar, but they were also gentle and comforting. "I love you, Mama. I love you, son." From the other side of the room came the sound of sniffles. Our friends turned and saw Dr. Malovo wiping tears in her eyes. I had no idea what you two were saying, but that was wonderful. Okay, let's see how long this next chapter is. Alright, I think I can read it. Chapter 85, The Guess. After traveling in secret, after running in fear, our friends were safe at last. But their problems weren't over yet. Although Roz had a brand new body, she had the same old mind, and most humans simply weren't ready for an emotional, curious, wild robot. There was only one place she could be her true self, and it was still far, far away. "Dr. Malovo, you have already been so kind to me and my son," said the robot, "but I must ask you one last favor." The woman sat back in her chair. "Can you take us home in your airship?" The woman laughed. "Well, of course I will. How else would you get to an island in the middle of an ocean?" Time and again, Roz had dreamed of flying back to her island in an airship, but she had never thought it would actually happen until now. "It's no trouble," the woman went on. We can have you home in a few hours, but I insist that you and Brightbill stay for a while in my apartment. You both deserve some peace and comfort, and I'd love company. There was no argument with Dr. Malovo, and our friends agreed to stay a while. The robot butler took care of everything and everyone in the apartment, and that included guests. Roz felt funny accepting help from the robot, but Brightbill happily soaked up the attention. The butler fed him fantastic salads made from exotic leafy plants. The butler placed a little pool in the living room so that he could swim whenever he liked. The butler built a cozy bed that was just the right size and shape for the young goose. Brightbill had never been so comfortable. Dr. Malovo divided her time between her guests and her work. She would sit around chatting with Roz and Brightbill and then suddenly head down to the factory with some urgent task. She had to design new robots, she had to supervise the makers and the Ricos, and she had to manage all of Tech Lab Industries. Even at her old age, Dr. Malovo was still consumed by a passion for robots. "If you love your job, it never feels like you work," she'd say, smiling and strolling out the door. When the host was working, the guests had the apartment to themselves. Roz spent hours browsing the bookshelf. She read about art and science and the history of robotics. Brightbill waddled from room to room and explored every corner of the sprawling apartment, but their favorite activity was standing by the windows, gaze across the city, and survey the incredible sights. I can see the ridge where Strider tracked me down, said Brightbill. And there's the building where I first met Greybeak, and there's the roof. Look far. In the distance, another airship is taking off, said Roz. It could be flying to the space station or the moon or beyond. I think that skyscraper is actually a greenhouse, said Brightbill. I flew past it and saw nothing but plants inside. Roz and Brightbill enjoyed their time in Dr. Malovo's apartment, but they missed their friends in the wilderness and the island. After a few days, the guests were growing restless. They were ready to go home. Chapter 86. Oh, never mind, I'm actually going to stop here. Never mind the flight. Sitting on the pavement, glinting in the sun, was a sleek white airship. For so long, those white ships had filled the robot with dread. Now one was about to solve all her problems. The door hummed open, and Dr. Malovo, Roz, and Brightbill climbed aboard. Once they were comfortable, the woman spoke to the airship. Take us to the island where Rozum Unit 7134 was found. The engines fired up, and the ship lifted off. It floated high into the air, turned to the north, and started cruising above the city. Three of them quietly watched the buildings and streets pass below. The city seemed to go on forever, but as they flew faster and farther, it slowly gave way to towns and countryside. They crossed the hard edge of the coastline, and then there was only the ocean and the sky and the airship. The ocean was deep, however, scattered throughout the dark depths were shallow areas, sandbars, reefs, islands just under the waves. In places, bizarre rock formations stuck up from the shallows, or were the ruins of old buildings. The mysterious shapes faded behind the airship and were replaced by more dark depths. The ship flew on, and the hours flew by. Gradually, fluffy clouds came into view on the edge of the horizon. Beneath the clouds was a faint smudge of green. The island. It grew closer and bigger than Roz was gazing out onto all the places she'd missed. The rocky shore, the mountain and the waterfall, the forests and the meadows and all the ponds. Air blasted toward the ground as the ship lowered itself into a grassy clearing. It gently touched down. The engine's power